Hey, it's Nick with B&H, and we're live here at the B&H SuperStore here in our Tech Corner specifically, and today we're here to chat about this guy, the brand new GH7. It was just announced last night. We obviously have a lot to chat about with this, and to help me with that, we have an amazing panel here to help us do just that. So without further ado, Brad, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Brad from Panasonic. I'm the account manager, senior account manager, and B&H's account manager. Former professional photographer for 30 years, based out of Cleveland, Ohio. This is one of the cameras I've been most excited to see since joining Lumix 6 years ago. So I'm ready to roll.
And we were just chatting before we recorded. It has been a very eventful, I was going to say year for Panasonic, but just the past 2 weeks. This is the second camera that has come out in as many weeks.
Yeah, we've been very busy. Last 2 weeks of launches with the full frame S9, now the GH7. And then we had the hidden feature last night that was announced at the last minute, which was great on this camera. So we've been busy.
It's weird to have something not be leaked ahead of time and be genuinely surprised to see it. So yeah, a lot to talk about there. And then Sherif.
My name is Sherif. I'm an independent filmmaker and cinematographer based in New York. I also have a YouTube channel called The DP Journey, where I discuss a lot of camera gear, cinematography gear from cameras, lenses, lights, and so on. Yeah, that's it.
I will say, in my opinion, Sherif is being modest. He has a fantastic YouTube channel. They're very in-depth reviews that come from having lots of hands-on time with it, which I very much appreciated.
I realized you subscribed years ago.
I subscribed years ago when I was looking, because I ended up getting a Lumix S5 partially because of your, I think, what did you call it? Like the very nerdy.
The poor man's
S1H. Yes,
yeah.
yes, I was sold. So, like I said, we're going to be chatting about the GH7 today. And if you have any questions in the chat, please let us know. And what we'll try to do is over the course of this conversation, answer as many of them as we can. But we're also going to set aside some time towards the end to answer any questions we didn't get around to. And I will also say, if you're in the New York City area, from 2 to 7 p.m. here in the SuperStore, we'll be having hands-on demo time with the GH7. So if you can sneak out of work, please go ahead and swing down, and you can play with that a little bit as well. Now, to get started, Brad, I think this question is for you. I'm sure a lot of people watching this have already devoured the initial round of initial reviews and read all the specs, but for those who are brand new to the GH7, what is it, where does it improve upon the GH6, and kind of who is it intended for?
So it's really designed for the filmmaker, somebody who's aspiring to get into film. We've got a lot of improved features in this camera, including the phase detect autofocus, the stabilization, the internal RAW, for one thing, that's huge. And last night's announcement that we were alluding to, right?
Yes.
The announcement of RALog C3 profile that you can upgrade to. But yeah, this is a true hybrid camera. This is what's going to allow people to take the best of both worlds with photography up to 100 megapixel handheld high-res mode, as well as unlimited recording internal with ProRes RAW.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like the GH line's been so well known, obviously, for its video features. You almost forget it's actually a very capable stills camera as well. It's actually very similar to the G9 II, which I'm sure we'll chat about. But one thing I was curious about your perspective, Sherif. Now, I know you from your fantastic YouTube channel, but I know that obviously you are a working cinematographer, filmmaker, photographer, and so I was kind of curious just what your kind of standard workflow looks like, what clients you normally work with, and what are the instances where you have used Lumix cameras as opposed to other brands? Because I know you're not tied to any one brand, you use the best tool for the job, but where has Lumix kind of fit into your workflow?
I remember the first time Lumix caught my attention was the GH2, actually. It was, I can't remember, it was maybe 2006 or something, when there was someone who hacked into the camera and got like the best out of the camera. And apparently Panasonic kind of noticed that, and they launched the GH3 with like a lot of features that the guy hacked, you know. This was the very first time I got I got my hands on the GH3, and I was actually, funny enough, like I went to an event, like a workshop event, and I met someone from Panasonic, and I told them I want to check it out, and I ended up shooting the video, the promo video. Back then I was living in Dubai. So this was the first time I had my experience with the Panasonic camera. And for a very long time, I was using it alongside the Canon as well, you know, like a full frame version and so on. It depends on, each one has its own, pros and cons. Yep. I love the size, of course, and so on. I took it so many times in travel shoots. because I had many projects, like work projects, actual shoots with the clients and so on, and we needed something super portable. So I spent like probably 6 months with the GH4. I remember 4 cameras in a backpack, and all the lenses fit in another backpack, and we were just traveling, shooting this show, for like almost 6 months. So yeah, like I have a lot of experience with it. Fast forward, a lot of other cameras started coming up, whether Sony, Canon, and so on, started focusing on the mirrorless aspect of filmmaking. And this is when I started, kind of exploring everything else as well.
Amazing. Now, obviously, each successive GH camera, because my own story is, I think I had a very, very previously loved GH4 was my first camera I shot with. It was very, very well worn, but that was kind of where I cut my teeth on just like the next step up with video. And obviously, each successive GH camera has introduced a lot of new features, but kind of going, I guess this is for you, Brad, with the GH6 to the GH7, there's a lot of new upgrades, and I think the first thing we have to talk about is the autofocus. We are now onto a phase-detect autofocus system for the first time in the GH camera now.
Well, it's actually a hybrid. So
Or hybrid, excuse me,
yeah,
yes.
it uses DFD and phase
That's
detect.
right, yes.
So you kind of get the best of both worlds with the focus by wire and being able to change your throw, linear, nonlinear. But yeah, the focus definitely locks on. We've added a couple autofocus features to it, including trains and planes, and you can select different parts. As well as, of course, the most important is, people. That's what we use a lot of these cameras for. So changing between a full body versus eye detection, as well as pets and things like that. So there's a lot of various focus modes in here, including tracking. But I will tell you, again, I'm a photographer at heart, and that's why I have Sherif here. He's video at heart. But shooting with this system, my hit rate on photography is about 95-98%. So I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah, and I, a little bit biased, I own an S5 too, and I can attest to having had the S5 and then the S5 II, you can absolutely see the autofocus improvements across both of them. And we did get some, here at B&H, we did have a chance to do a little video on the GH7, which you should watch if you have not watched already. But we did do some autofocus tests, and it was very consistent with what the S5 II had, and even the G9 II. It was very reliable. Sherif, I know you had some beta software, and so I know you weren't able to do that in the ProRes RAW recording, which we will talk about later. But were you able to do some autofocus tests with this?
I did have a brief experience with it since, as you said, like I had a 0.32 firmware when I got the camera to shoot the film that I shot. So in RAW, it was not active yet. So I only used, I was manual focusing in many scenes when I was shooting RAW, but then there was one time where I needed to get an autofocus because I couldn't nail it exactly perfectly. I didn't have time, so I switched to 4:2, and I got I got autofocus. And it was again it was the first time for me to kind of get an phase detection from a Lumix camera. So I was like, okay, that's working so far. I still need to do more tests to kind of see how good is it. And but I had a brief experience with it.
I love how you are normally so thorough, all these asterisks of I just had a little bit of time with it, we'll do much more thorough tests, but we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now, we've mentioned it a few times already now, and I feel like we should just talk about it. Internal ProRes RAW. I almost feel like that's all we need to say. But you can now, to either CF Express or external SSD, record absolutely real ProRes RAW in a GH Micro Four Thirds camera body now.
Yes, and it's... To that point, it has the CF Express Type B card as well as SD for video proxy files, which we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, it's again unlimited recording. The SSD recording external is limited to 2 terabytes.
Okay.
So you can't just do unlimited, in terms of space, but you're limited to 2 terabytes. Still a lot of footage. It allows you to get your footage into your computer a lot quicker than using a card to transfer.
Yes, yeah, because we had the CF Express card. I think we saw that ProRes RAW on a 500 gigabyte CF Express card would have given us, I think, 21 minutes of footage. So
that's about right.
The SSD solution is definitely welcome. And I was going to talk about this later, but I guess it should come up now.
Yeah.
One other obvious thing about recording ProRes RAW internally is it will almost certainly drain the battery noticeably faster. But there is a dummy battery solution that Panasonic has now that allows you to use the USB-C port for the SSD, and then you can have a dummy battery set up. And the dummy battery, I wish I had it with me right now, but there's a little cable sticking out, and it now has USB-C for you to plug it into not just like a V-mount battery, but to really any other power solution.
So that's really it. It's you know, the DCC 17.
Yes.
DCC 17. Stumbled a little bit there.
Season.
Yes, it's a USB-C, and it comes out if you want to do a standard AC plug. It's the AC11 power adapter. But you're right, it's a USB-C, so you can use a power bank and plug that into there, as well as be using the SSD via USB-C off the side. So you can't get the best of both worlds. You don't have to use a V-mount battery any longer. You're a little bit more flexible with the whole system, and it might keep it a little bit lighter, a little bit more kind of run and gun feel.
I think this is the first camera in the market that does that, like a battery with a USB-C. Because I always had this problem, like whenever I'm shooting with many other cameras, and I usually hook it to power, honestly, so whether it's an interview or not, I don't want to stress about batteries running out and so on. So I remember, I had this problem because whenever I put the power on the USB-C, then I cannot shoot externally, with a drive or an SSD. So this, I was kind of very happy with this.
Yeah, we had
Panasonic didn't send me yet this piece, but I'm looking forward to it because this way I can start testing, shooting on SSD and having the USB-C just dedicated battery for it to power the camera.
Sometimes with third-party dummy batteries, where you have to jerry-rig the bottom out, I don't really trust it, so I try to find different solutions.
And I think they have a specific hole for it,
The rest of the people in the video team are kind of roasting me for this gently, but over the fact that I think amongst all of the incredibly impressive tech in this, I was the most excited over the little flap at the bottom that accommodates.
Everybody wonders what this is for.
Exactly. So you can essentially thread the cable through and keep the battery compartment fully closed, which is just so nice. It's so nice to have a really elegant first-party solution to this. And I know that the GH6, I believe, had this as well, but the USB-C port now at the end with the DCC 18.
I forget, 15 maybe, I don't know.
It's a part number with a bunch of letters and, a bunch of letters and numbers. But it's a really nice solution because it's just nice that Lumix considered, okay, if we're really going to let people record ProRes RAW internally on this, we have to have some sort of battery solution to accommodate that. And it just seems really refreshing.
And while I haven't, again, I told you before we went live here, I've had the camera less than 24 hours myself. But by having that little rubber grommet that you can pop out, that enables to keep the camera weather sealed as well.
Yes.
So you're not letting moisture necessarily getting into there. So I believe that there'll be a little gasket around that battery door that will enable to keep that whole thing sealed.
Which is great. Now, one thing that I've really liked about Lumix cameras in the past is the built-in image stabilization. To me, in my experience, it's just the most natural looking in terms of just wanting to make it look like you're shooting handheld without those little herky-jerky moments you get with most small mirrorless bodies. And this one is, I believe it's the exact same IBIS that the G9 II has, 7.5 stops.
Yeah, 7.5 stops.
Yes.
Dual IBIS.
Now, I'm curious, Sherif, because I feel like a lot of time, for some filmmakers working with dedicated cinema cameras, IBIS, it's not necessarily blasphemy, but it's what you use for a mirrorless camera. But I was curious, were there ever instances where you have utilized the built-in image stabilization on Lumix cameras?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the film that I shot for the GH7, this was all shot handheld, actually. I didn't.
Oh, really?
I didn't use any gimbals or tripods or monopods or anything to stabilize. So, I mean, I can show you here. I usually have a two-handle solution for me. So it's like I have a top handle and I have a side handle. So this way I can have a little bit more stabilization.
Gotcha.
I'm relatively stable. I have relatively stable hands. I don't drink much coffee, so so it's relatively stable. But definitely, I mean, this helped a lot in this one. It kind of gave me a little bit more confidence in, okay, I'm fine with that. At a couple of moments, maybe I was just tired or something. I was shooting also, keep in mind, they have an E-stabilization now, which has 2 modes. Mm-hmm. But this doesn't work in RAW. So I remember one time as well, I was shooting another RAW scene, and then I had to switch back to 4:2 so I can get the E-stabilization to get it done, and then I switch back to RAW. So again, it's always good to have options.
Yes.
When the camera kind of works for you, not against you. So yeah, again, I didn't have too much experience with it, but I did have the stabilization on when I was shooting the piece for it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's. I feel like Panasonic cameras generally do not give you. They've never been accused of not giving you enough options, even in terms of just like record modes. There's an all-intra version of everything. There's a long GOP version of everything. There's now been ProRes versions and now ProRes RAW versions. And it's essentially, as far as I remember, this is almost entirely a 10-bit camera as well. Like, there's really nothing you can shoot that won't give you more latitude for like color grading in post or anything like that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you're. 5.8K 30 or 420 10-bit. You can do, 4K, Cinema 4K up to 120.
Yep.
And then you can do a full HD 240. I think it's 422 10-bit.
Yeah,
as well.
I saw that there was
Yeah.
10-bit 422. It's very good, usable, super slow-mo footage in 1080p. So it's just great to have the option.
Yeah. If I may, I want to interject
please,
one other thing.
please.
So you talked about the camera being kind of customizable and all the different features in the camera. Some of the hidden features in there is that if you long press some of the buttons, for example, the autofocus button on the back,
Yep.
if you press and hold that, it can engage a whole other list of menus, so you can customize it and quick access any one of a number of features within the camera, so you don't have to dig through the menu system, which is very intuitive in and of itself.
Oh, so in other words, it's unrelated to autofocus. Like you can hold that, and then it just opens up a second functionality.
Opens
for
up
the...
second functionality. So it's 3 or 4 buttons within the camera. It should be the Q button, the autofocus select button, the play button, and then button on the front of the camera.
Wow.
So,
I also want to add to this. Like I remember, again, shooting with a lot of cinema cameras and even the semi-pro cameras, like prosumers and so on. Many times you have like an option to choose your own selection of formats, like if I'm going, because this happens so many times, when I'm going on set and I know what I'm going to be shooting, sometimes the director would tell me, okay, I need this to be shot in 24, and then another one is going to be shot in 60, and then another one even at 97 or something. So it becomes challenging, like on set when the hustle and bustle of what's happening, like to change super quick. So what I usually do, I own a RED camera, so I customize the menu for me for those specific settings, and that's it, and turn off everything. But then with this camera, unlike any other mirrorless cameras I have at least, you have this My Menu function. I always had it since God knows when, probably GH3 when it first started.
So.
And I have an assigned button for it. I press it. I know that I'm going to shoot these formats, these frame rates, and this kind of compression. I would just click and, okay, I just have 3 or 4 because the camera has, as you said, I don't know, it's like a 50-something formats. I mean, combination of formats and resolutions. And so it was like, no, I cannot keep on scrolling in the middle of the set.
There might be other brands that have this feature, but I noticed with Panasonic cameras, there's literally a filter where you can just say, I want to shoot in this, I want to shoot in 4K.
Yeah,
this one, and it will just filter out what is even available.
It tells you if you're shooting HLG or
Yes.
it lists your frame rate, your bit rate, everything right there. So there's no second guessing. You don't have to go back to a book or some PDF on your phone. It's right there laid out in the camera.
Exactly, yeah.
One also has mentioned the whole notion of like the camera working for you, not against you. And one thing that this maintains that really no previous GH cameras really had an issue with is with overheating. It's really not an issue. I believe the spec said essentially truly unlimited recording. Obviously the 2 terabyte, if you really are recording ProRes RAW for hours, sure, but that will be limited just by storage essentially at that point.
Yeah, you're limited by storage and or your battery life.
Yes.
Other than that is unlimited. Within reason. If it's 110 degrees out here in New York City one day.
If you're in Death Valley recording ProRes RAW, like an interview.
Yeah.
Who isn't there doing that?
Exactly.
Keep in mind again, like in a professional setting, you don't really keep on shooting the whole day.
Exactly.
Like you need to swap cards to dump the footage.
Yeah.
If you have a DIT, they would take the footage, and you need to keep on changing cards in any case. So yeah.
That is another thing that's just it's nice not to have a subject you don't have to tiptoe around. You can just record comfortably and trust the camera that it will be able to just continue to do that.
I know it's rated up to about 104 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yep.
Sean, who pretty much everybody knows from our Lumix Live, lives in Austin, Texas, and I'm pretty sure he's put most of our cameras to test beyond that, living in the heat of Texas, and he's really faced very little challenges, if ever.
He's such a professional. He moved to Austin just to heat test all the Panasonic
Yes.
cameras. This is
He's committed.
complete rumor. This is not at all true.
May I say, I used to live in Dubai where it reaches 125
Oh, yes.
degrees.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
I mean, I did have a couple of shoots before, and that level, like the phone switches off, you know, like
Yes.
it would say overheat warning and stuff. So, and the humidity and stuff. But yeah, it's good to know that, again, I will not stress out if it gets really hot, you know.
Yes.
Honestly, if it gets really hot, I'm not going to shoot, to be honest.
Yes.
So I'm just going to find a shade or something.
Yeah, I guess pun intended. I've been burned by cameras in the past, so it's nice to. Thank you. I'll be here all night. Now, another thing I wanted to mention was dynamic range on this as well, because there was DR boost feature introduced with the GH6. The G9 continued this and simplified this, but on the note of simplifying it, long story short, you're just getting better dynamic range on this camera than, and it's not even a setting you need to enable. It's essentially just there.
Yeah, and I think that's really a function of the slightly redesigned sensor. We have to remember this isn't the same sensor pulled out of a GH6.
Yes.
This is a BSI CMOS sensor. So many acronyms. You know, and that's what enables you to get that enhanced dynamic range.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily an issue, because I know that there are some people who will still dismiss Micro Four Thirds as saying, no, I need the full frame look or at least APS-C, but I think in the past, maybe you couldn't get as much dynamic range, but genuinely, like the images, like just in our tests, the images we got on this camera in a very high contrast area, we were shooting at an open window with subjects in front, and the roll-off was great. The image looked very filmic. I know it's a very broad, vague term, but it genuinely looked very nice. And you're getting it in this tiny little Micro Four Thirds body and with a smaller sensor that I think some people dismiss as not being able to give you that sort of result.
Look, there's a tool for everybody, for every need, everything. And I think that this is just another tool in the toolbox, right? You know, the Micro Four Thirds camera keeps the camera smaller, lighter. You can fit in tighter spaces with it. You know, less rolling shutter because, you know, it doesn't have to travel as far. So there's a lot of those type advantages to a smaller sensor camera. And, you know, if you don't want a smaller sensor, great. You know, we got S5 Mark II X for you too.
Exactly.
So again, just a different tool for everybody's needs.
You know, honestly, the small sensor, everybody's been talking so many times, you know, about how small sensors, they don't have, like they would be very noisy or they would have less dynamic range or it was going to be compromised. Honestly, my tests I've done in so many other cameras, including the phone, you know, the iPhone,
Yes.
you know. So you don't have that much compromise. You know, the main compromise I would say, which I experience, and this is the only reason why I would say I wouldn't want to use a small sensor camera, is depth of field if you need that much
Yes.
depth of field.
Right.
I actually remember the film that I shot as well for the camera, which was some of it was just showing now. There was one point I wanted to shoot a wide angle, but I needed the depth of field.
Gotcha.
And I didn't get it as much as I wanted, but it was good enough. It's like, okay, this is borderline what I can accept. But how I managed is that I asked her to come closer to the camera and further from the background, you know, so there are kind of a blocking way that you can kind of get around it.
Yeah.
I had the 10-25 1.7 lens, the Leica lens. So I just had to tell her, okay, let's just rearrange the set a little bit just for this shot, and then we'll go back again. So that was it. So there are ways to get around it, but when it comes to dynamic range, noise, and so on, so far all my tests of recent cameras, they were pretty much the same as full frame.
I think you kind of perfectly answered the next question I was going to bring up. And you even alluded to this earlier. Just what are you looking for, like, in a camera when you're planning a specific production? Like, I know for the GH7, you know, you were given it early and you were able to shoot this video with it. But are there any other things that you haven't mentioned already where you would go to a smaller Micro Four Thirds body, even when you have access to like a RED camera or like a more dedicated cinema camera, where this just gives you advantages that you might not get with those?
Definitely the size is the most important thing in, I would say it's the highlight of the Micro Four Thirds cameras. I mean, for me at least. So like, I prefer shooting in full frame because it gives me, as I said, it gives me the option. If I want to have shallow depth of field, then I can have it. The Micro Four Thirds doesn't, but the Micro Four Thirds gives you the size. So if I'm traveling and so on, like I remember one time I wanted to travel with a photo camera and a video camera. And I wouldn't say there's a great hybrid camera at the moment that I personally like. I know there's a lot good ones, but I personally didn't
Check
find any.
B&H.com for all of those.
For a list.
Yes. endless list.
So I took a photo camera. I can't remember which one was it back then. And then I took a GH camera because, okay, all this, the lenses will fit, will fit in a small bag because of the small size. So while any full frame will definitely, it's not just the body, it's the lenses that come with it. So if you compare the lenses of the 1235, which is equivalent to 2470 in terms of field of view, the full frame ones are massive, are like probably twice.
So much bigger.
Twice the size, maybe more, and the weight as well. So to me, this camera is more on the size, portability, but now it has internal RAW, so that's another reason. Now it has 32-bit float, which is another reason. So like, it gives you the option that if you want to strip things down to the bare minimum, you don't have to hook up things to it to get RAW. Let's say you need the Atomos recorder to get ProRes RAW, or maybe the what is it called, the Blackmagic monitor
for
to get the
B-RAW.
B-RAW. I don't know if it doesn't work on this, but maybe in another camera. So, or you don't need another recorder, an external recorder to get 32-bit audio. So with this stripped down to the bare, you can get RAW, you can get 32-bit, and that's the option filmmakers need. You know, whether it's good for you or not. I personally need every single camera I own. I have a Red, I have Canons, Sonys, Panasonics, from Micro Four Thirds, Super 35 to full frame to VistaVision. I don't have a preference on which one I'm going to take on my shoot because the shoot is the one that dictates it. One of them is there a client on set that wants to see a big camera or not? So
yes.
that's one drawback in this one. It's like it's not going to look as big as the camera that what the client would want, you know. But for an independent filmmaker, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good option besides the other options based on your shoot.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned 32-bit float, which I feel like perfectly segues into some of the accessories that also launched with this, including this guy.
Yeah, the XLR2, offering 2 XLR adapters and a 3.5 jack off the side, as well as a shotgun mic holder. But yeah, this allows you to, as Sherif outlined, 32-bit float audio. And for those people that don't know, you know, depending on the audio that you're using, sometimes in loud situations, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You're the cinematographer.
I mean, one I shot is actually had a loud situation because when I got the camera and I heard about this 32-bit float thing, the subject that I'm shooting is actually, she's a weightlifter. So there's a lot of metal clunking, you know, and things that will easily clip, you know, like it will peak easily and it will go off the range of the mic or recorder. So I definitely thought that, 32-bit would be a good test for it. So I went there, I got everything Foley. I mean, all the sounds there that are Foley. Of course, like I used some extra sounds in the film itself, but whatever was happening there was mainly shooting what she's going through. Like I even had to go, like I'm actually working on a behind the scene episode to show the process that I went through. But I would tell her, okay, just lift the thing and let it slam on the metal, you know, so I can grab this audio. And again, like I can just pull it down and it wouldn't peak. So this was a good, again, it's an option that you have.
Yeah.
Whether you need it or not, it depends on the shoot, but it's another option. So it's, all what we're discussing is mainly how much flexibility a camera gives you as a filmmaker. So, and I feel this one kind of went a little bit beyond the typical things that we see from a mirrorless camera at least, and from that size as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've also liked Panasonic cameras for a while, because they're just very generous with the features they give you. Like even simple things like, shutter angle. Like not every mirrorless camera gives you stuff like that, or waveforms, or other like video assist tools.
Vectorscopes or whatever.
Yes,
Yeah.
you get them all in here.
And just kind of circling back on this, you know, the fact that you have the 2 XLRs and the 3.5 millimeter, you can split that 3.5, run the 2 XLRs, and get up to 4 channels of audio on that 5.8K track.
Yeah, I hadn't had the luxury to play with 32-bit float audio until fairly recently, actually. And once you, it just feels miraculous when you see something that looks completely clipped and you can save it, or bring up something too quiet without introducing a ton of noise into your audio. So it's it's very nice to have. And once again, it's plug in and play essentially. As soon as you have it hooked up, it connects to the camera body, phantom powered, and you can just immediately access the settings through the camera.
Yes.
So
I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, you still have the button right on top of the camera that you can access the 4 channels of audio right away.
This is actually a question that I just had in the moment. No one in the chat even asked this. Is this going to be compatible with other Lumix cameras, or right now, do you know, is it just for the GH7?
So the XLR2 is backward compatible.
Okay.
However, GH7's the only one will do 32-bit float.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay, so in other words, if you want the 32-bit float, got to go with the GH7, but you could still use it to plug in XLR cables or microphones, even on other Lumix bodies.
Yeah, GH6, GH5, S5 Mark II, Mark IIX.
I want to put in a request for the XLR3 to have an SSD or an SD card slot so you can record in it as well. That would be perfect.
I was really hoping I was going to have that in this one, but the engineers went a different way.
Because why I'm asking this, because when I was shooting as well, I wanted to record some Foley sounds, and I had to record video with it, but I only needed the audio, so which kind of takes space, and you need to record in ProRes.
Yep.
So here's a public request to Panasonic as well.
A few questions have come up in the chat. I just wanted to address one or two of them because I think you had already answered some of these. So just very quickly, one question is there going to be a battery grip for this? And that is no, correct?
Short answer is no. That's why we have the dummy battery that you can attach a power bank to that, the USB-C.
Yeah, I would argue you're still getting very flexible options because if you're not recording through USB-C to the SSD through USB-C, that is also power delivery as well.
Yep.
But if you are, you have the dummy battery as an option too. And then another question that you just fully answered for me right before we went on was, is this the exact same sensor as the G9 II?
So no, it is a little bit of an enhanced sensor. Again, BSC CMOS, which enables it to get that better dynamic range overall.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And on the note of dynamic range, I guess this is as good a time as any to segue into this. I think we have to talk about, so a little insider baseball, we obviously get the cameras when they're embargoed a little bit ahead of time. And so usually we know what to expect the day it launches. But then last night, RE-Log C3, out of nowhere, completely not leaked, once again, somehow, that is now an optional upgrade you can get in this camera. But can you, I guess I'm curious, well, there's A, just the logistics of what that gets you, but then B, how that even happened. Do you know? Do you have any idea of how?
So it was a conversation that happened between RE and Panasonic, of course, and the interest of getting people to be able to use their color profiles and also give Hollywood an option, if they want to have something that in Hollywood, New York, whatever, can have a camera that they can fit in tight spaces, becomes a disposable camera, and RE isn't really disposable. So, but this is an affordable option, and I think it really gives filmmakers an avenue to explore the RE color profile, that real cinematic, Hollywood standard, if you will.
So would you say that's kind of the intended, person who would be getting this, someone who has an RE and needs a crash cam, or if you just were shooting on this, let's say something very small independent, and you just wanted to be able to get those RE colors? Yeah.
I'll tell you an example of, before I ever shot with an RE camera, I always wondered how it looks like and so on. How does the log file look and the image and so on. So I guess this could be a good entry level for someone who wants to upgrade sometime soon, or someone who's about to get into on a set where there's an RE camera and so on. So this is from a lower, maybe a beginner side, but from a professional side, I feel, as you said, it could be whether a crash cam or a B cam for, let's say, an action scene or something, where the workflow is all based, because in bigger productions, usually there's someone who's working on the workflow and they kind of agree on it and they create LUTs for it and so on. And sometimes you would have a live LUT application, where you see how the footage will look like, to the director. The director can ask for that. I shot something a couple of years ago for Amazon Prime, and the director wanted to see how the image would look like graded, So the colors was there. So I'm imagining if I want to just go and test something super quick without getting the big RE camera, to kind of, okay, here's how it's going to look like. It's going to take 5 people to kind of move this setup. I can just grab this one and here you go. It's going to be like I don't know how close it is going to be into performance of an Alexa, though.
Yep.
But at least it's going to get you there if it's closely accurate. That's something I still want to test. But this is what I'm seeing I will personally use in my workflow. If there's an RE camera there, the director wants to see everything live, then maybe I can just grab this one. Instead of a viewfinder, I can just grab this camera. Okay, here's how the look is gonna be, the colors and so on.
And I don't want to forget about one very important segment of users are students.
Yes.
There's a lot of cinematography students out there wanting to break in the industry, and again, on a student budget, you don't necessarily can't really swing an RE camera. You get
Not the schools I went to.
You get the choice of using
Yeah.
them, but once you get out in the real world, this is again another tool in your tool bag.
And people are also asking $200 for the upgrade key for this. Is that correct?
Yes, so
Okay.
it's $200. It's the SFU3A that you buy as a unlock code, and then you install into the camera.
But once again, please keep in mind, you are getting we haven't really talked much about Vlog. I have shot 80% of my stuff on the Lumix just in Vlog in H.265, and that gives you an immensely gradable image just by itself. But then you've also got ProRes if you want, you've got ProRes RAW if you want, and now this is yet another option. Kind of, I feel like if there's a thesis statement on the GH7, it's that you have options.
Well, and kind of going back to our GH6, G9, the S9, S5 Mark II, S5 Mark IIX, you can program up many different LUTs into the camera too to match the colors of your Sonys, your Canons, whoever it is. So again, it's just another tool in the bag. We play well with others.
Yes.
And I think that's something that can't be underscored too much. I mean, the fact, and now we have the Lumix Lab app,
Yes.
which is opening a whole nother channel of communication that with Frame.io into this camera, so you can do camera to cloud. The camera is really just completely feature packed. I think the engineers did a fantastic job. Chef's kiss to them. They added a lot of features to this camera that I think a lot of people, they were listening to the consumer public.
Well, speaking of listening to them, the Lumix Lab app, that made a big splash with the S9 that came out recently. One question someone had, though, and I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but they were asking how many slots are there for preloaded LUTs for Lumix Lab photos? Do you happen to know?
So I know in the S9 it's 40. It's historically been 10. It may be more in this. Again, I haven't even really had this camera in my hands. It came out less than 24 hours ago. I just went to the office, picked it up before coming here. So everything else has been on PowerPoint to this point for me. So I'm going to commit to, I think it's 10, but please don't hold me to that.
Yeah.
We'll do some research and we'll get back to you.
This should be a slightly easier question, because you also mentioned playing nicely with others. Some people just have questions on recommended lenses for this, and I feel like there's one huge can of worms you could open with speed boosters and just getting whatever PL lens your heart desires. But I think, Sherif, like you were saying, one of the advantages to Micro Four Thirds is that the lenses are so much smaller, and you can still get excellent optical quality. So were there Micro Four Thirds specific lenses you can recommend that you use with this? Or do you adapt
as
a lot
you
of
said, it's like once you get speed boosters or adapters, lens adapters, like you can, there's
The world's
infinite
your
amount
oyster.
of lenses. Like there's nothing. I mean, the question would be, it depends on what kind of thing you shoot. Like what I did, for instance, I used 3 lenses: the 10-25, the 25-50, which I didn't even know they existed, by the way. But then I used the Lens Baby, which is like a super affordable tilt shift lens, like for $300 or something. Because I needed a couple of shots to be shot in that kind of distorted, background with distorted bokeh and so on. So, I mean, it depends on your creativity, your vision is what dictates the lens. It's not, there's nothing specific there.
I think that this camera is going to lend itself well to really 3 lenses. The run and gun is going to be the 12-35.
Yep.
As Sherif kind of outlined, the 10-25 and 25-50. I challenge you to find a lens this size that's a 1.7 all the way through the range.
Yes.
It's a 2x crop, of course, but you're covered from 20 to 100 millimeters at 1.7. So you have all the light gathering capability you need in 2 lenses.
That It's funny, I did the video for the G9 II when that came out, and I'm so used to, here at B&H, we get a lot of APS-C and full frame, and even like medium format camera bodies and lenses. And I remember we had the 100 to 400, which I will say up front is much more of a photography lens than a filmmaking lens, but you could obviously use it for that. But you lose track of just how much smaller Micro Four Thirds lenses are. Getting a 200 to 800 focal equivalent in like a handheld little body was just so refreshing to have. And so yeah, you certainly have options.
Maybe one more thing I could add to this. I mean, to answer this question, if you need the features that the camera offers, whether it's stabilization or autofocus,
Yes.
then you need to stick to the Lumix.
Right.
Yes.
But of course, like I was kind of talking because when I'm kind of thinking of shooting anything, I see the look that I'm looking for before I see the options that I need from it.
Yes.
So yeah. I mean, going back to my answer, I would say, for the features that it offers, that the camera offers, then yes, the 10, 25, 50. Honestly, this kind of is once I started using those, this was the very first time to use it actually. I felt like I don't need the other lenses that I have. I have the 12-24 and the 24 to what? 70 or something? No,
1260?
It's the 20. I can't remember. It was.
I'm trying to remember myself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the tele lens.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I feel like the 10-25, the 25-50 could be good enough because they have 1.7 as well. They're just bigger. I mean, this is the 10-25. It kind of looks like a full frame lens in terms of size, but again, it's 1.7. So
Yes.
It's really light too. It's deceptively light.
Yeah.
And you have the pullback clutch for manual focus for those that need to switch.
Yeah.
And the clickless aperture right on the
Yeah.
ring. So
Yeah.
again, and you also kind of have the knurled edges. So if you
Yep.
want to do a focus pull on it, you can mount that to it. So it's fully capable of being rigged out for sure.
Yes, fully stripped down or fully rigged out,
Yeah,
or even partially
either
rigged
way.
out, like we're seeing there. And two things were kind of mentioned. You kind of casually threw in the Frame IO integration into this. I saw you slide on.
Yep.
And then there was also, Sherif, you were talking about how if you want to show a director a certain look, like the ability to like show the LUT on it. And there's a specific combination for a workflow that I ran by you to see if you could do this. So with the GH7, with the new Lumix Lab app and real-time LUTs, you can bake a LUT into this if you want to. Now, I'm sure the majority of people filming or watching this obviously might not want to do that. You want to have the flexibility to grade in post. But one thing that was interesting is if you're recording proxies on this, you can designate the real-time LUT to be baked into the proxies if you want,
Right.
but not the hero footage. So, in other words, there's a workflow where you could either import a LUT, create your own to showcase what the final look you want to be is, record that to the proxies, have the proxies be uploaded to Frame IO, and immediately be accessible to either like a client or a remote editor even. That is a workflow that you could do with this?
Yeah, so I mean, the use case I see here, having shot a million weddings, the use case I see here is for a cinematographer who's capturing the day, gets it to a editor on the back end, and they have a deliverable to show their client right at the a sizzle reel right at the reception, or whatever it is. You have that immediate deliverable.
Yes.
As you point out, by having those LUTs baked into the proxy file.
Now, I think we've actually answered. Please let us know in the chat right now if we haven't. But we've tried to answer all of your questions with our amazing panel here. The only other thing I'm very interested to, it's not really a question, but getting some time to actually try this RE Log C3 will be very fun to give a shot, because obviously in our tests and yours as well, we didn't get the chance to do that. But if we could compare within RE and kind of see what it looks like, that would be...
I'm going to commit. We're going to get B&H a copy, so you guys can do a test footage. So you guys kind of get to the video, the first look, let's say. Now we're going to give you guys. We'll give the public a second look. So let's do it.
Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Once again, a lot to talk about. Can't wait to give it a second look now, even beyond just what we were able to see for our first look. So thank you both, Brad and Sherif, for sharing your thoughts on this. Is there anything else any other features that we didn't mention that you want to make sure that we got across? It's quite an extensive laundry list. I think we hit most of them,
Yeah.
but
I think we pretty much covered it. It has a full HDMI out.
Yep.
No
Thank you.
surprise there. You're welcome. and just weather sealed as well. So
Yes.
again,
That one thing I might add, for instance, like I kind of liked. I remember when the RAW came on. I mean, Panasonic cameras, generally speaking, starting with the S1H.
Yep.
The main problem I had was there's no redundancy. Like once I started recording on the external recorder, I couldn't record anything internal. That's something that didn't exist in other cameras. You know, like they would record simultaneously. So, but now with this, it's kind of reversed. So you get internal RAW, but then externally you can record 4:2 or whichever format the recorder can record. So to me, this gave me again the confidence that if anything happens to this one, it will record that one. And as far as I know as well, like you can, which I haven't tested, but you can record proxies on the SD card, right?
correct.
So would that be possible then? Like I'll record RAW on the CF Express and then proxies on the SD card and then 4:2 on the recorder?
Can I have to get back to you on that? I'm not 100% sure. Like I said,
Okay.
That's a great question.
that's a great question. You, you
when
stumped me.
whenever because I had so many chats with Panasonic, you know, asking, pretty much throwing a lot of hypotheticals at them, you know, like, okay, sometime in the past this happened to me and I couldn't achieve it with this camera, you know, so sometimes they actually have to get back to me as well. It's like because it would be a very unique situation, you know, and I kind of felt that this is the main thing I would say about this camera, is that it gives you the flexibility. It has a lot of options, you know. It's and I miss this in any other, you know, mirrorless cameras from the major other brands, because like many times I'm like, okay, if I'm just solo, if I'm the director, writer, DP, editor, everything, then fine, then you can find the camera that fits you. But once you reach a point where you have to grow and start dealing with directors, with producers that are demanding, and they would kind of ask weird things in the middle of a shoot. Oh, can I have this? It's like, I don't know, you know, you got, even with the Red, you know, like with the Red, when I'm shooting with it, many times I've fallen into this situation, you know. So this camera, I feel like sometimes now, I wish many of those features would exist in cinema cameras.
Yeah.
Because it's so customizable and it has a lot of buttons for such a small camera. I don't like too much touching stuff, you know, like the menu inside of menu. Like, physical buttons are always great, you know, on set for quick retrieval of something, you know. So for me, as a filmmaker who used this camera and used Lumix before, I feel the key word in this is not about just the RAW or the 32-bit and so on. It's the options that you get. You have the flexibility. I can go confidently saying, okay, if they throw anything at me, probably it will have a solution to it. You know, you were talking about LUTs. You can even mix LUTs, you know, like the degrees of how much of this LUT in reference to this LUT, which happened to me on set before, but I couldn't do it on camera, so we had to go to the computer and do it, and so on. So I feel, to me, this is what this camera is about, and this is the main highlight for it. Now, with all those extra options, we have more freedom as filmmakers to create. The important thing is we need to start creating. It's not just about the camera. The camera is not what makes you a filmmaker in the end. So,
yes. Yeah, you both emphasized, at the end of the day, this is a tool. Hopefully it is facilitating the story that you're trying to tell, but at the end of the day, that's what it's intended to do.
Yep.
And I won't propose Lumix to give a specific tagline to this, but I feel like GH7 : you've got options is a fair way to summarize it.
This should be it. You got options.
And that kind of ties the thesis fully together to summarize what the GH7 is all about. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for watching and for all the questions that you asked. And I just also want to thank you, my panel, again, for all of your expertise and insight on this. Can't wait to play with the ARRILOG C3, hopefully at some point in the future. But that is it for our discussion on the GH7. Thank you again so much for tuning in. I'm Nick with B&H, and we will see you next time.